These are the spectators that were watching.
Engines at 65%, 3 engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second, altitude 4.3 knots.
This is raw, unedited video, just sent via satellite.
Engines throttling up, 3 engines out, 104%. Challenger, go with throttle up.
The picture you were just seeing is Christy McCullough's parents watching in horror. These are the students from her school.
Flight here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction.
Many of them probably had their view blocked just as we did with the television cameras, with just a huge fireball and a huge cloud of smoke. They may not realize yet what has happened. You see concern etched on their faces. The breath that they've been holding released. And then the realization sets in that something is wrong.
That shower in the back there, something came apart. When the stage came apart.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
At that point, all that remained was
Flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We're looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point. Contingency procedures are in effect.
Edward and Grace Corrigan. They were about 3.5 miles away from the area of the launch pad in the VIP launch area.
Looking at all the contingency operations and awaiting word from any recovery forces in the downrange field.
Families of the astronauts normally in the grandstands.
Tom, as John Zarella pointed out from the Cape earlier, when all of us first saw the blast, there was a moment of stunned silence and disbelief. Many people perhaps did confuse it with the, is it the booster
The
rockets?
solid rocket booster separation, which
But it was
occurs
really,
a little later.
it was
came
far
much
too early and far too big an explosion. And it took a while, I'm sure, for it to sink in the minds of the parents and the school
There you
children.
see Mr. and Mrs. Corrigan still standing, saying a silent prayer. Those are Christy McCullough's parents.
It's Edward and Grace Corrigan. Mrs. Corrigan had said in an earlier interview with CNN that she would be thrilled to be the one to be up there herself. That she once took flying lessons just because she liked the adventure of it. They'd always encouraged their daughter to be adventurous and to go for it, in her words.
Tom, the area that we were just watching, the bleachers where people were watching and photographing the launch, who was allowed in there?
That is the VIP section, invited guests for this launch. I myself received an invitation from Michael Smith, who was the pilot on this flight, to sit in these same bleachers and to watch his launch. Michael Smith has been a guest here on CNN before on our launch coverage and sent me a special invitation to go.
That would then include family members of the astronauts, friends?
It includes family members. I understand there was a delegation from China of 100 people, school children from New Hampshire.
Quite approximately 28.64 degrees north.
Challenger's pilot, as Tom just said, was Mike Smith, 40 years old. He was a commander in the U.S. Navy. He's from Beaufort, North Carolina, a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He served in Vietnam, is married, and has 3 children. And we had an interview with him here on CNN back in July. Let's play that for you.
Heather, as an initial reaction, what do you think went wrong?
It's difficult to say, Alistair. I've looked at the pictures and I've seen the slowed down version as well. It looks to me initially as if something went wrong with the shuttle itself. If you look at the pictures in slow motion, it looks as if the right-hand engine of the shuttle itself exploded. You could see a tongue of flame coming out of it. That is right over the liquid oxygen fuel tank, which feeds the liquid oxygen from that enormous tank, the big brown tank that you see lifting off with shuttle, into the shuttle itself. So an explosion would have ignited the liquid oxygen, and that would have led to an immediate explosion of the whole assembly. And I think, as you saw, the whole of Challenger was just engulfed by flame. Nobody would have stood a chance.
That central tank you were describing is, as I understand it, liquid fuel, and would that have explained the flash fire that we saw in those pictures?
Yes, absolutely. You probably saw at the same time, again, if you look at a replay of the film, the 2 solid fuel boosters, which gives shuttles such a tremendous thrust on takeoff, they were actually ejected after that happened. The interesting point about it is that the explosion occurred at no specific state during the shuttle countdown. It wasn't when they should have ejected the solid fuel boosters. It happened 1 minute, 15 seconds into launch. And it's not clear what happened, except there does seem to have been a fault in the shuttle's own motors, its own engines. But again, I think we'll have to look at the videos again and see what wreckage is left.
2, 1, and liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
Roger, roll, Challenger. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange. Engines beginning throttling down now at 94%. Normal throttles most of the flight, 104%. We'll throttle down to 65% shortly. Engines at 65%. 3 engines running normally. 3 good fuel cells. 3 good APUs. Velocity 2,257 feet per second. Altitude 4.3 nautical miles. Downrange distance 3 nautical miles. Engines throttling up. 3 engines now at 104%. Challenger, go with throttle up. Challenger, go with throttle up. 1 minute 15 seconds. Velocity 2,900 feet per second. Altitude 9 nautical miles. Downrange distance 7 nautical miles. Here looking very carefully at the situation. Obviously a major malfunction. We have no downlink.
Shower in the back there. That's supposed to be there. Something came apart. When the stage came apart.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded. Flight director confirms that. We are looking at checking with the recovery forces to see what can be done at this point. Contingency procedures are in effect.
Gave me the wrong stuff.
We will report more as we have information available. Again, to repeat, we have a report relayed through the flight dynamics office that the vehicle has exploded. We are now looking at all the contingency operations and awaiting word from any recovery forces in the downrange field. at this time. as to the location of the recovery forces in the field to see what may be possible at this point. Three engines running normally, 3 good fuel cells, 3 good APUs. Good roll program confirmed. Challenger now heading downrange.
To the unforeseen eye, this appears to be an accident, but the reality remains that this traumatic experience could have been prevented. On January 26, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger was all set to launch its 28th mission after sustaining 5 launch delays. Everything seemed all set for the launch. Morton Thiokol, a NASA contractor that is responsible for making the solid rocket boosters, initiated a teleconference call with NASA to discuss postponing the launch till the temperature increases. Unfortunately, the first mistake NASA and Thiokol made was excluding the engineers, who are experts on the parts, from being a part of the conference. The engineers knew that the solid rocket boosters could not stand the cold temperature that Florida was experiencing during the week of January 26th. The average temperature during the week was in the low 50s, with the minimum temperature to operate the solid rocket boosters being 53 degrees. Thiokol's engineers did not want to take the chance of something happening to the shuttle. Unlike the engineers, the managers of Thiokol were not thinking about the state of the shuttle. After 5 launch delays, the last thing they wanted was to risk losing NASA as a client. Thiokol's managers took a vote to decide whether to launch or not, also excluding the engineers from the vote. The managers decided with almost a unanimous decision to allow the shuttle to launch. The engineers just prayed that the temperature would increase by launch time. On Sunday, January 26, 1986, the date the Challenger was set to launch, the shuttle was delayed once more due to a mechanical error with the door hinge. The launch was postponed for the last time to the final launch date of Tuesday, January 28, 1986. The engineers' worst fears were realized when the temperature on Tuesday dipped down into the lower 20s, which was much lower than the rocket boosters could handle. One of the head engineers at NASA told the manager to call off the launch due to the low temperature, with the manager replying,
"If we don't launch now, we will not be able to launch again until April."
Against NASA and Thiokol's engineers' wishes and advice, the shuttle launched at 11:38 a.m. It wasn't long after launch before the devastating events of the day began. 0.06 milliseconds after liftoff, darkish gray puffs of smoke began escaping from the right solid rocket booster. These dark puffs of smoke were hot gas escaping through a gap in the O-rings. These puffs wore away and enlarged the gap in the O-rings. O-rings are gaskets in the solid rocket boosters that are supposed to expand with the movement of the shuttle. The cold temperature on the day of the launch prevented the rings from expanding like they were designed to. At 45 seconds into the launch, there were 3 bright flashes of fire, each coming from the Challenger's right wing. At 58.7 seconds into the flight, hot gases began leaking from the right solid rocket booster. The propellants had been leaking for some time at this point. At 60 seconds, telemetry showed that the chamber pressures were different in each booster. The right booster had a lower chamber pressure. At this point in time, NASA knew something was really wrong. There was indeed an intensifying leak in the field joint area. At 62 seconds into the launch, systems control began reacting to the differential pressures in the boosters. They lowered the pressure in the left booster to counteract for the lack of pressure in the right booster. Unfortunately, this did not solve the entire problem. The rocket booster breached the external fuel tank at 64 seconds after launch, changing the color of the plume cloud. Within 45 milliseconds of the breach, the fire from the plume began roaring down the backside of the space shuttle. At 73.12 seconds after launch, a white vapor became visible from the side of the external fuel tank. This was the beginning of the structural failure of the external fuel tank. The failure caused massive amounts of liquid hydrogen to be released, suddenly creating 2.5 million pounds of forward thrust, pushing the full hydrogen The full-scale redesign was accomplished by the year 2000 and cost an estimated amount of $1 billion. NASA also took the action of creating new and improved statistics for flight risks. Previous to the Challenger incident, NASA statistics read about a 1 in 100,000 chance of a disaster. Presently, it reads a 1 in 78 chance of a disaster during launch. It was also announced that by 2010, a new generation of spaceships would make their debut and forever revolutionize the economic and safety of space shuttles in America. There seems to be no question that despite the struggles and setbacks, NASA is putting forth an honorable effort for the improvement, innovation, and the continued American dream of reaching for the stars.
No shock wave or other evidence of a violent explosion was detected in the imagery. Illumination from a combination of SRB plume radiance, reflected sunlight, and peripheral burning of gases gives the cloud the appearance of a fireball. By 73.6 seconds, the main engines were in automatic shutdown mode as a result of reduced propellant pressures. The last telemetry from Challenger was received 73.618 seconds after launch. The actual vehicle breakup was essentially obscured from view by the vapor cloud which abruptly enveloped the vehicle. Hundreds of fragments were noted exiting the ET cloud. Those identified included the shuttle main engines, the left wing, crew cabin, and both SRBs.
What was happening to the crew at this moment? They were still alive.
Challenge is fast, launch is fast. It's bang, and then it's a 2-minute ride down. And you're conscious, we know that.
Astronaut Story Musgrave told me the crew survived in that white cloud. It was Challenger's fuel tank that exploded. The shuttle itself just broke apart. The crew compartment with its 7 living occupants was intact.
The initial path of the crew cabin from the vapor cloud carried it across the path of an adjacent contrail, clearly revealing its truncated form and attitude. The left wing became visible at 78.531 seconds. The main engines and crew cabin are also identifiable.
It took 2 minutes and 45 seconds for the crew cabin to hit the water. The impact speed was 207 miles an hour. A NASA statement released after the accident reads, "The forces to which the crew were exposed during orbiter breakup were probably not sufficient to cause death or serious injury." And later, NASA is unable to determine positively the cause of death of the Challenger astronauts, but has established that it is possible but not certain that the loss of consciousness did occur in the seconds following the orbiter breakup. Musgrave, who is a medical doctor and surgeon, is quite certain.
You died when you hit the water. You know that.
You think so? That's always been controversial.
I don't know, sir. There's nothing controversial about that. No. It's hard evidence. Yeah, he died when you hit the water.
At the bottom of the ocean, investigators found that some of the crew's emergency oxygen masks had been turned on. Said another astronaut, Scobie fought for any and every edge to survive. He flew that ship without wings all the way down. They were alive.
You could have lost consciousness at that altitude if it depressurized for a little while, but then, no, there's all kinds of evidence that you died when you hit the water.